Hi and welcome to Sub to Cloud. Today we are continuing to talking about things that I hate on AWS because I had more things to share with you. Things that I hate on AWS version 2. I need to share with you other thing that I hate on AWS. Today we are talking more about AWS services or in more technical way. And for example, we talk about why I hate AWS CloudFormation and AWS CDK. Okay, AWS CloudFormation is not a bad product. It's a good product. I started using AWS CloudFormation before use Terraform, and I love it in that moment. But I find a lot of problems with CloudFormation. For example, when a new resource are launched, a new resource or new services don't have compatibility with AWS CloudFormation, and and sometimes have compatibility with Terraform or Pulumi or other infrastructure as code tools. Why? That is very weird. I suppose that is a thing. It's a consequence about 2pixatin that we talked in the last video. Because why you know it that you will launch a new service or a new feature. Why you don't implement in CloudFormation before you launch the functionality? That is sometimes it's very weird and you need to wait a lot. And you can't use AWS CloudFormation or CDK. How CloudFormation manage the drifts? That is the worst thing that I did. When someone's do a thing outside of CloudFormation doesn't know. And to put these changes on CloudFormation, sometimes, or the majority of times, is awful. It's very hard, need a lot of time, and sometimes it's close to impossible. And I hate this a lot. And when that happen or when you try to solve this problem, sometimes you broken your CloudFormation and it's impossible to recover. And to solve this, sometimes, very few times, but that happened to me, you need to delete your AWS CloudFormation stack. That happened also with CDK because you use CloudFormation in the background, okay, in the under hood. And that is the problem with what is one of the problems that I had with CloudFormation is this. You can solve problems. It's very easy to broken and you need to spend a lot of time with CloudFormation. And I think AWS can improve CloudFormation a lot. You can copy some things about Terraform or how Terraform works and help to you to how to solve the drift problems. And AWS don't do it. And for me, that is the big problem of CloudFormation, the drifts, and I hate this. AWS organization. I don't hate AWS organization, but I hate some implementation of AWS organization. And to explain this, we need to back to the past to 2004 when AWS born, because at this moment AWS born with a different structure. They have all the resources in one account. You only use one account at the beginning, or is how AWS designed the cloud at this moment. But that have a lot of problems, and they change this and implement AWS organization in 2017, and they implement organization to have because the companies have multiple accounts and it's very hard to manage at this moment, and they implement AWS organization to help us to manage AWS accounts for one organization. But some integration at this moment doesn't exist. Now the integration are grow a lot, but sometimes it's very hard or new product don't born or don't be launched with full integration with AWS organization, and that is a big problem. Also, for me, another problem is the limit of SCPs, the SCP security control policy limit, because you have a limit of size to policies, and you can only apply 5 policies per level. And that is a big problem because sometimes you need more flexibility, or when you do this, it's very complex to manage policies because you need to mix a lot of different things in the same policy to accomplish the limit of number of policies and the limit of size, and can be problematic and can be a challenge to do this. Also, for me, another problem is the inheritance of policies. You can disable the inheritance for some policies, and that is for me very a feature that I requested a lot of time, because when you need to disable a service control policy, now you need to create another organizational unit outside of your root tree and put the SCP, the new SCP, excluding the one that you can don't use, in a new tree outside of your organizational unit that have this SCP, and is very complex. And sometimes the tree of AWS organization is very complex and very strange for this, because you need to do this for don't apply some policies to some accounts. That is a problem. And also, for me, another problem is the conditional on SCPs, because works weird. For example, if you have an or conditional, that is not not permitted, because at that moment you only have the or. The and is losses, and that you can mix different conditional levels, and that's minimize the complexity, the power of security control policies, and create a lot of problems. And for me, the last problem is the building, because in AWS you can have only one pager per AWS organization. Exist some tricks to have more than one pager, but it's very hard. And I hate this because that things are very complex to companies, and to explain big companies how to work on AWS is very hard, and it's very painful to use AWS organizations sometimes. Now we are talking about AWS build. That is awful. For me, it's one of the worst things that I did on AWS, because it's very hard to manage. It's impossible to have multiple pages. Exist tricks to do this, but when you need to have multiple pages in a big organization, it's impossible. AWS is trying to implement a solution for this, but now doesn't exist, and it's very hard to manage different billing for different organizational unit, business unit on a big corporation. And sometimes no. In AWS, you need to AWS bill to you in one account, in the master account. You need to pay them and distribute your costs internally. And sometimes in some corporation that is hard, and sometimes it's very complex about the taxes, because also this is very painful. How manage taxes per country is awful on AWS. It's a big problem, because you can do easily. When you create a new account, you need to go to the taxes, change the settings, and it's very hard. Also, one of the problems for me is the marketplace AWS Inc. Because when you buy some in Europe, when you buy some product on the marketplace, you need to have a credit card, because bank account doesn't work with marketplace, and you need to use a credit card, and that is awful. That is awful how to manage, because depends of if the product is in the European Union marketplace or is in the AWS marketplace. Usually, all the tools, all the products are in the global marketplace. You have only one payment method. You can mix pay with credit card, pay this with PayPal with credit card, pay with bank account, with transfer account, and that is very hard to manage on the AWS bill. And the last thing that I hate is the AWS bill API, because it doesn't exist. It exists an API, but but have a lot of lags, a lot of gaps. You can do a lot of things. For example, the tax manage the taxes using the API is very hard. I don't know if they launch a new version with this, but in the past it's impossible. And for example, you can do a lot of action on the API that you can do on the console. That is weird, because AWS said, or exists a rule that all action need to be due by API, not by the console. Primary by the API, and later implement the console. And on AWS doesn't works in the same level. And the last thing is, when something goes wrong with the AWS bill, you need to be a new bill, or maybe you don't understand one concept. You have the EC2 others. That is a box that put all the different concepts, different billing concepts in the same way, in the same topic. Okay, that is EC2 others. And sometimes it's hard to understand why. For example, if the old bill cycling, I think is the name, when you have a problem with a payment and you request a new bill to AWS, they put all your bill into this topic on EC2, into this concept on EC2 other. That is weird, and it's like a will card for any bill concept. Another thing that I hate is calculate AWS cost, because sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's close to impossible. It's impossible to calculate, to use the calculator to calculate any service, because you have lack of data. It's very typical you don't have the full context of costs on AWS, or the number of calls that you do an internal API, or the number of register that you query on DNS. That is impossible. Sometimes you have your own data from on-prem or from anything, and sometimes when that data is on AWS, also doesn't exist metric. For example, happens to me to calculate the Route 53 resolver query logs. How many logs I can implement a DNS firewall, and I need to know the number of register that Route 53 do, and not exist a metric. It's impossible. I find a metric. I ask to AWS, and they don't have a metric to do this. And I use their own services. And sometimes to calculate AWS cost for some services, not for all, is very hard. Like GuardDuty, like CrowdTrail, the VPC flow log, the Route 53 resolver query logs. Sometimes the only way to calculate this AWS cost is try the AWS services. Try GuardDuty. Enable GuardDuty for 1 month and use this month to calculate the cost of the rest of the year. And that is not very cool when you talk with a customer, or when you talk with your boss. I want to enable GuardDuty, but I don't know how many how many will it be cost, how many what the price. And I hate this because it's very hard to calculate this cost on AWS. In the last year, I discovered something that happens on AWS that are new for me because in the past didn't happen, and is the services not ready. When AWS launch a new services, have different phases. Okay, exists a secret a secret phase when they are developing the new service. We don't know anything. They started with the private preview. That is when they let some customer, usually the customer that are requested the feature, to test these services in a private preview. Okay, you need to sign a document to try the new service, and you need to try and test the service with AWS. When the service starts to be ready, they launch the public preview, and anyone can request access and test the new product. But this product is not ready for production. It's ready for tested, and you need to share the feedback with AWS. And the last phase is when a service is ready, they launch the service generally available. That's a new product and is ready for you. But in the last times, that is not true. Sometimes they launch a product that, in my case, have some of black, some of gaps that you need to request new features or request different things because are not ready or have some fails. And they launch a new version a few months later, and this evolution, this new version, is ready. Have the lack or the gaps that you note in the first times, and that is a thing that I discover or I view or I watch it in the last times in AWS. Doesn't happen in the past. When they launch a new product, it's ready, and now sometimes these services are not ready until 1 year later. And for me, that is a bad thing. I hate this because sometimes when I try or I tested some new services are awful for me. I need to wait for few months to have the enough features or the enough security for this product that the product or the services start to work fine. And that is awful for me. And that didn't happen in the past. And I hate this. Till now, we are not talking about AWS services that we use it on our workloads. But exists a service that I hate a lot. And this service is AWS API Gateway. Why I hate this product, these services? Okay, because I think this service is not enough or is not have the same level of quality of all of other AWS services. And for example, for me, it's not an API manager. AWS don't have API manager on AWS. AWS API Gateway is a good service and is enough for some things, but it's not an API manager. Other thing, for example, the authorizer. When you deploy an authorizer on API Gateway, you need to deploy a Lambda. And you need to modify this Lambda. Instead, have this set up on the services to connect, for example, for your IDP, for your IDP, to connect for your IDP or connect with the other authorizer. You need to deploy a Lambda, okay? It's pre-configured by AWS, but you need to modify the Lambda to do this, and this is awful. Also, for example, sometimes use OpenAPI version 2 is awful when you are using AWS services with other AWS services. You can use OpenAPI, also private APIs. When you try to put a private API, you need to put an LLV in front of the API, and that is a very weird thing and very complex, and it's not very serverless, for example, or it's not very easy to manage. And that is weird thing, or it's a bad thing for me. Another time, the edge, how to manage when you put an edge on the edge configuration on AWS API Gateway. You will deploy a CloudFront, but it's a CloudFront that is not managed by you, it's managed by AWS. But you watch the CloudFront distribution, and you can use your own CloudFront distribution. For use them, you need to use the regional API. And that's configuration is weird, it's problematic, and it's very confused for me. And I don't like the service. I think this service need to be rebuilt and improve a lot. That is one service that I hate a lot, and I think to need a lot of improvements. Okay, I talk very bad, or I expose my the bad thing, the things that I hate on AWS in these two videos. But at the same time, I have a very good feeling in the last 8-9 months on AWS. I I think AWS changed their mindset in the last times to start to solve a lot of the problems that we talk. A lot of the things that we talk are started to change in the last months, and this is the way. I think AWS have a lot of improvement in the next. Will be have a lot of improvement in the next month and in the next years, and I think that is a good thing. And that is all. Bye bye.